All right, hi. I'm going to be discussing this experiment called the resonance stabilization energy of benzene, and we've accomplished this using bomb calorimetry, and I'll be going over what bomb calorimetry is and how it is used to calculate the resonance energy, and then all the results from the experiment. So let's dive right in. Okay, so this is basically the explicit goal of the experiment to determine resonance energy of benzene using bomb calorimetry. And it seems pretty simple, but the chemistry behind it gets pretty interesting. And if you're at all interested in chemical reactions, um, is especially interesting. Though it might not sound the most interesting. I assure you that these types of experiments allow us to gain a lot of information about these compounds, and that a lot of the technology that you interact with every day is built around this kind of understanding. So bomb calorimetry. Here's basically these reactants that we're going to use: benzene, cyclohexane, and CDT. Uh, this equation here is called an isodesmic reaction, where the number of bonds and type of bonds in CDDT as the product here is equal to the sum and number of bonds in benzene plus cyclohexane. And that's important because uh, it means that the heat of combustion for CDDT will equal the heat of combustion for benzene and cyclohexane combined. We're missing one thing though, and I'll get to that in the next part of the little story here. But basically, CDDT, if you don't know, it's an intermediate basically, and it's used in the production of a lot of different polymers, flame retardants, and even food flavors. So the one thing that the equation did not take into account, okay, is that benzene exhibits resonance, unlike cyclohexane, because it's a conjugated system of pi bonds, which is why benzene is drawn this way. So in reality, this experiment, we're going to find all the variables in this equation, and what will be left is the resonance energy for benzene. And that's the basic idea of the experiment. The hypothesis that we're going to test here is that the resonance of energy of benzene should be lower than the energy of formation of benzene, because it should take less energy to shift electron density compared to forming bonds. So we think. Okay, and I'll just briefly go over the way that we are going to obtain data for these variables in the equation. So calorimetry is essentially measuring heat transfer in a system, okay? And it can be as simple as dropping a metal of some known temperature into an insulated cup of water and measuring the temperature change that occurs. And that's a physical change. We're working with a chemical change here, but it works the same for a chemical reaction. In that example, actually, all you would need to do is to make it a chemical reaction is drop like alkali metal in it, right? And that would be a chemical reaction for the heat transfer. And so in this experiment, the bomb calorimeter here, which is a particular type of calorimeter, keeps volume constant, so that the only relevant variables, according to this equation, is the heat capacity of the bomb, that's negative C bomb here, and the temperature of the water in the calorimeter before and after T2 and T1. And that is equal to the total delta U, or the heat evolved in the reaction. Okay. So just a little bit ago, I told you that this experiment is important. So I just wanted to clarify here. Studying heat transfer and combustion energies is how scientists actually, or I'm sorry, not energy, energies is how scientists actually determine properties of materials that would otherwise be unknown. So thermodynamic work published by this guy, Walther Nernst, made Fritz Haber's discovery of modern ammonia synthesis possible because of his understanding of bond enthalpies and heat transfer. This was really new stuff in like the early 20th century. So basically, the Haber-Bosch process produces pretty much all the ammonia in the world, which also produces all the synthetic fertilizer pretty much in the world. So this type of understanding of bond enthalpies and heat transfer feeds the world, sort of. Okay. So let's go into this experiment here a little bit more. I've already described sort of the idea behind the bomb calorimeter, but here is the basic diagram setup here. Oxygen and a spark ignite the reagents, and the temperature is measured here with the thermometer. And all the reagents are weighed, cyclohexane and CDDT. We have 2 runs for each of those. Cyclohexane, we had to put into a gel capsule within the bomb because it's extremely volatile, so it will escape, and we just waited. So, but within the bomb, the combustion energy for the gel capsule is also factored in. So that's not a problem. And here are some pictures of what the actual experimental setup looks like. These are the actual, this is the actual bomb calorimeter that was used in the experiment. Okay, so here are some temperature graphs that we got from the experiment we recorded. These graphs help visualize sort of really like how the reaction is happening inside the bomb calorimeter. You can see that the temperature is increasing at the start a lot, right? That's right when the ignition takes place right around here, right? And then it starts to increase a lot, and then eventually the reaction starts to level off. And it happens the same way basically for both CDDT and cyclohexane, right? And it shows really like the finite amount of energy that happens once the explosion occurs, and then it's absorbed by the water and it equilibrates. And so while these graphs might not look like much right now, they really give us a lot of valuable information about the combustion energy and the heat transfer that we're going to use to calculate things a little later. Okay. So here's the most important equation, I would say, that these graphs help solve for. And these graphs the graphs from the previous slide help solve for this equation for the temperature change in the bomb calorimeter. This is what that equation is. And basically, we're most concerned with the second half here, which is equal to the change in temperature, delta T. So let's see some of these variables here. The TC is the temperature at which the maximum temperature, or is the time at which maximum temperature was reached, right? Or you could say the temperature, right? And that was the flat part of the graph that we looked at and on the previous slide. And TA is the temperature right before the detonation of the bomb. That was much lower, considerably lower. R1 is the slope of the temperature line between the firing of the bomb and 1 minute after the bomb was detonated, around there. R2 is the slope of the temperature line between the time of the final temperature, which is different from the maximum temperature, and it's usually around 90 seconds after the maximum temperature. But so it is the slope between the final temperature and maximum temperature, if that makes sense. Okay. The variable A is the time at which the bomb was fired. B is the time at which 60% or so of the total temperature is reached. So it's sort of like the inflection point in the graph when it was at that hyperbolic part. And C was the time of the maximum temperature. Okay. And after finding delta T, we're able to determine the amount of heat evolved in the bomb calorimeter, and that tells us our resonance energy. Okay, so in terms of data here, the hypothesis was proven incorrect, which happens, and the resonance energy of benzene was larger than the heat of combustion. And benzene may be fairly unique in this property, and I'll discuss a little bit later. But other than that, the experiment functioned as expected, and based on the graphs generated. And it's still important to note that while this experiment worked as expected, that Sigris is likely to be the most accurate for this type of calculation because random error is minimized, and you can perform a lot of calculations quickly, whereas this whole setup takes a lot of time. But it should be noted that human error is still present even in Sigris. If you make the wrong molecule or select the wrong calculations, that's still present. Okay. Additionally, we've got some other methods for finding the resonance energy of benzene. I researched this method called stepwise hydrogenation of benzene to cyclohexane, and it works in a similar principle to the one used in this experiment. It basically yields an enthalpy after there are 3 different steps, and when these enthalpies are added up, they still don't equal the heat of combustion of benzene. So the difference in that is the actual resonance energy. And that's really similar to what we did in our experiment. A little bit different, but very similar. Okay, so I told you we were going to discuss why the resonance energy for benzene was so high. And for this question, I think it's important to note that benzene has some interesting qualities, including aromaticity, and which these other compounds here that I'm showing you lack, right? This is octatetraene and cyclooctatetraene. And it is not aromatic, right? These are conjugated sp2 carbon chains, and they are not aromatic because they're not a ring. So this aromaticity of benzene, where the electrons are delocalized in a ring, are real. It's really that's really the reason why the resonance energy for benzene is so high, and why it is different than these other molecules that also have conjugated chains or rings with sp2 carbons, right? So in conclusion, the resonance energy of benzene was determined through bomb calorimetry, and though you might not think about it, much of our understanding of thermodynamics is possible through experiments like these, including the Haber-Bosch process, which feeds the world with synthetic fertilizer. All right, thanks for listening.